Standing at my daughter's funeral, watching my family whisper behind their hands while my 6-year-old son tugged at the pastor's robe. The church was suffocating with the scent of white roses and judgment, both equally poisonous in that moment. Pastor Whitmore, Tommy's small voice cut through the hymns like a blade through silk. Every head in that packed church turned toward my little boy in his oversized black suit, the one we'd bought just 3 days ago because who keeps funeral clothes for a 6-year-old? Pastor Whitmore, he said again, louder this time. Should I tell everyone what Aunt Karen did to Sissy in the basement? The entire church went silent, not the respectful quiet of prayer or the heavy silence of grief, but the sharp electric silence of shock. I watched my sister Karen's face drain of color as she gripped the pew in front of her so hard her knuckles went white. My mother stopped mid-prayer, her rosary beads frozen between her fingers. The hymn books closed with soft thuds throughout the congregation. "Tommy," I whispered, reaching for him, but he stepped away from me, closer to the pastor, his dinosaur toy clutched in one hand. It was the same stuffed T-Rex that Meredith had given him last Christmas, the one he hadn't let go of since we found her. Karen stood up from her front row seat, her voice shaking as she tried to laugh it off. Children say the strangest things when they're grieving. "Tommy, sweetheart, come sit with Auntie Karen." "No," Tommy's voice echoed off the church walls. "You're a liar. You're the reason Sissy is in that box." My heart stopped. The funeral director shifted uncomfortably near Meredith's white casket, the one we'd chosen because she'd always said white was the color of new beginnings. I remembered arguing with the funeral home about the cost, how they'd tried to upsell me on the Eternal Peace package, while my 14-year-old daughter lay in their basement, waiting to be prepared for viewing. Pastor Whitmore knelt down to Tommy's level, his kind eyes concerned. "Son, this is a very serious thing to say. Are you sure you want to talk about this now?" Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his round cheeks. "Sissy made me promise. She said if something bad happened to her, I had to tell someone at a place where Aunt Karen couldn't make me disappear too." The word disappear sent a chill through the congregation. I saw Detective Reyes, who'd come to pay his respects after handling the initial investigation, straighten in his seat near the back. He'd been the one to close Meredith's case as a suicide just 48 hours ago. My mother, Judith, finally found her voice. "This is inappropriate. We're here to mourn Meredith, not listen to a confused child's fantasies. Rachel, control your son." But I couldn't move. I was frozen, watching my sister's face cycle through expressions I'd never seen before. Fear, rage, calculation. This wasn't the Karen who'd helped me through my divorce, who'd volunteered to watch Meredith when I had to work double shifts at the hospital. This was someone I didn't recognize. "The basement has a lock on the outside," Tommy continued, his small voice carrying impossible weight. "Aunt Karen would take Sissy down there every Tuesday and Thursday. She told me I couldn't come because it was for big girls only. But I heard Sissy crying through the vents." My legs gave out and I sank into the pew. Tuesday and Thursday, the exact days Karen watched Meredith after school. The days Meredith would come home quiet and withdrawn, barely touching her dinner, disappearing into her room with her headphones on. I thought it was teenage moodiness, normal adolescent behavior. How many times had I missed the signs? "She's lying in that casket because of you." Tommy pointed his small finger at Karen, and in that moment he looked so much like Meredith when she was angry. The same determined set of his jaw, the same fire in his green eyes. "Sissy wrote it all down. She told me where she hid everything. She knew you'd try to pretend after she was gone." Karen took a step toward Tommy, and something primal in me sparked to life. I stood up, putting myself between my son and my sister. "Don't you dare touch him." The church held its breath. 300 people waiting to see what would happen next, their funeral programs forgotten in their laps. Someone's baby started crying in the back, the sound almost shocking in its normalcy. And suddenly, everything about Meredith's death made horrifying sense. 3 days earlier, I'd found my 14-year-old daughter Meredith in her bedroom. The morning sun was streaming through her purple curtains, the ones she'd begged me to buy last year because they matched her favorite hoodie. She was lying on her bed, still in her school uniform from the day before, her hand holding an empty prescription bottle that used to contain my anxiety medication. The note she left was brief, written in her neat handwriting on a piece of notebook paper. I can't do this anymore. Tell Tommy I love him. Mom, this isn't your fault. That last line destroyed me more than anything else, because if it wasn't my fault, then whose was it? The paramedics arrived within minutes, but I already knew. A mother knows. The way her skin looked, the stillness that was nothing like sleep. They tried CPR anyway, for my benefit, I think, while Tommy watched from the hallway, clutching that dinosaur toy Meredith had saved 3 months of allowance to buy him. Is Sissy sick? He'd asked, and I couldn't answer. How do you tell a 6-year-old that his sister chose to leave us? Detective Reyes had been kind but efficient. He asked about warning signs, about Meredith's mental state, about any recent trauma. I told him about the divorce 2 years ago, how Meredith's father had moved to Seattle and rarely called. I mentioned she'd been quieter lately, eating less, spending more time alone. Typical teenage behavior complicated by depression, he'd written in his notebook. The case was classified as suicide within 24 hours. The irony was that Meredith had been staying with my sister Karen every Tuesday and Thursday after school while I worked double shifts at Riverside Hospital. The nursing shortage meant mandatory overtime, and I was a single mother trying to keep our house, trying to maintain stability after the divorce. Karen had volunteered, actually insisted, when she found out I was paying for after-school care. Rachel, you need help. Let family step in, she'd said over coffee 6 months ago. Meredith's at that age where she needs guidance. I can help with homework, make sure she gets a proper dinner. You know teenagers shouldn't be left alone with all the dangers out there. My mother, Judith, had agreed immediately. It's good for Meredith to spend time with her aunt. Karen knows discipline. She raised 2 perfect boys before they went to college. Karen's sons, both at Ivy League schools now, were held up as the gold standard in our family. Meanwhile, my daughter was the one from the broken home, the one with the tired, overworked single mother. I'd been so grateful. Karen would pick Meredith up from school in her pristine white SUV, the one with the Proud Christian bumper sticker and the honor roll decals from her son's achievements. She lived in the better part of town, in a 2-story colonial with a finished basement she'd converted into what she called a study space, for when her boys visited from college. Meredith's doing great, Karen would tell me when I picked her up at 8:30 those nights, exhausted from my shift. We worked on her algebra, had a healthy dinner. She's such a sweet girl, Rachel. Just needs some structure. But Meredith would always be quiet on the drive home. When I asked about her time at Aunt Karen's, she'd just say, "Fine," and stare out the window. I thought she resented the arrangement, missed her friends, was embarrassed about needing supervision at 14. I promised her it was temporary, just until I could switch to day shifts. The funeral was supposed to be our goodbye. I'd spent money I didn't have on white roses because they were Meredith's favorite. She'd drawn them constantly in her sketchbook, delicate pencil drawings with thorns carefully detailed. The church was packed beyond capacity. Her entire freshman class came, wearing purple ribbons because that was her favorite color. Teachers who'd known her since elementary school sat weeping in the middle rows. Neighbors who'd watched her grow up, who'd bought Girl Scout cookies from her and cheered at her middle school soccer games, filled the back. Tommy sat beside me in his little black suit, the one the funeral director's wife had helped me find at the last minute. He kept asking when Sissy would wake up, when she would come back, why everyone was crying. He'd brought the dinosaur toy to show her, convinced she was just sleeping deeper than usual. The casket was closed at my request. I wanted people to remember Meredith as she'd been, vibrant, artistic, full of dreams about becoming a marine biologist. Not as I'd found her that morning, when everything ended and this nightmare began. During the viewing, my family's comments started small but cut deep. Karen approached first, her heels clicking on the church floor like a countdown to something terrible. She touched my shoulder with manicured fingers, and I could smell her expensive perfume, the same one she'd worn to every family gathering where she'd held court as the successful sister. "Rachel, I know this is hard, but maybe, just maybe, this is better," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "She was always troubled, just like—" She paused, glancing at our mother. "Well, you know." Some people are just broken from the start. The words hit me like physical blows. I looked at my daughter's casket, at the framed photo beside it showing Meredith laughing at last year's church picnic, and wondered how anyone could call that beautiful girl broken. My mother nodded, adding loudly enough for the entire front section to hear, "Mental illness runs in bloodlines. Your grandmother had episodes too. We should have seen this coming. First your postpartum depression, then your anxiety after the divorce. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." My father Gerald just stood there, silent as always, studying his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. 40 years of marriage to my mother had trained him well in the art of disappearing while standing in plain sight. "She wasn't broken," I whispered. But Karen continued, raising her voice as if she were giving a lecture to the gathering crowd. "Remember how she'd lock herself in her room? How she stopped eating properly? Classic signs, Rachel. You working all those hours probably didn't help either. Children need consistency, presence, not a mother who's gone 12 hours a day." The accusation burned. Every night I'd come home exhausted, I'd promised myself it was for Meredith's future, for college funds and stability. Now Karen was weaponizing my survival against me. The worst part was hearing other relatives agree. My cousin Beth murmured to her husband, "Poor thing never had a chance with those genetics." My Aunt Patricia added while clutching her pearl necklace, "At least she's at peace now. No more suffering from whatever demons haunted that family line." Demons? I turned to face Patricia. My daughter didn't have demons. She had homework and friends and dreams about swimming with dolphins. Karen's laugh was cold. "Rachel, denial won't help anyone. We all saw the signs. The moodiness, the artistic tendencies that bordered on obsessive, the way she'd stare into space. I tried to provide structure during our time together, but some children are just too damaged." "Damaged?" The word came out as a hiss. "You're calling my dead daughter damaged at her funeral?" "I'm calling her troubled, which she was," Karen said firmly. "Ask anyone here. They all noticed. The weight loss, the dark clothes, the way she'd barely speak at family dinners. I did my best to help her those afternoons, but you can't fix what's fundamentally broken." My Uncle Robert chimed in from behind us. "Karen's right. The girl needed professional help, not just after-school supervision, though God knows Karen tried her best." Tommy had been sitting quietly beside me through all of this, but I noticed his little hands were balled into fists. His face was red, and he was staring at Karen with an expression I'd never seen on his innocent face. Pure, undiluted anger. "You're a liar," he whispered, but only I heard him. When Karen walked past him to give her eulogy, she ruffled his hair with fake affection. Poor little Tommy. Lost and confused without his sister. Tommy jerked away from her touch like it burned. Karen took the podium, arranging her notes with theatrical precision. She'd always loved an audience, and now she had a captive one. "We gather here to mourn Meredith. Yes, but also to learn from this tragedy. Mental illness is real. It destroys families who ignore the warning signs. Meredith struggled with demons we couldn't understand, demons that Rachel refused to acknowledge." I stood up, ready to stop her, but my mother grabbed my wrist. "Sit down. You're making a scene. Let Karen speak the truth." "The truth?" I yanked my arm away. "The truth is that my daughter was fine until—" "Until what?" Karen challenged from the podium. "Until puberty? Until the divorce? Until she realized she'd inherited the family curse?" "Rachel, we tried to help. I opened my home to her twice a week, provided the stability you couldn't, and this is where we ended up anyway." That's when Tommy stood up. He was shaking, his dinosaur toy falling to the floor with a soft thud. He walked toward the podium with the determination of someone much older than 6, and the entire congregation watched as he pulled on Pastor Whitmore's robe. The pastor bent down, but Tommy's voice was clear and strong, carrying across the silent church with devastating clarity. Karen was mid-sentence at the podium, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Meredith struggled with demons we couldn't understand, and despite our best efforts to guide her toward the light, when Tommy pulled on Pastor Whitmore's robe with urgent determination, The pastor bent down, but Tommy's voice carried throughout the acoustic church, clear as a bell and twice as jarring. "Should I tell everyone what Aunt Karen did to Sissy in the basement?" Karen froze at the podium, her carefully prepared eulogy cards scattering from her hands like guilty secrets. Her mouth opened and closed without sound, resembling a fish pulled from water. "Tommy, sweetheart, you're confused. Grief makes children say strange things." "No, I'm not confused." Tommy's voice got louder, stronger. He stood straighter, all 4 feet of righteous anger in his little black suit. "Sissy told me everything. She made me promise not to tell while she was alive, because you said you'd hurt me too, but she's not alive anymore, so the promise doesn't count." I stood up from the pew, my legs shaking like they might give out. The church felt like it was spinning around me. "Tommy, what are you talking about?" "What basement?" My son looked directly at Karen, his green eyes blazing with a fury that belonged on someone much older. "The basement at Aunt Karen's house, where she took Sissy every Tuesday and Thursday after making her drink the special tea that made her feel funny, where she did the bad things that made Sissy cry and beg to come home." Karen stepped away from the podium, nearly tripping over her own feet. "This child is obviously traumatized. He's making up stories. Rachel, control your son before he says something he'll regret." "You told Sissy she was dirty," Tommy continued, his small voice devastating in its clarity. "You locked her down there for hours. You showed her those videos on your computer, the ones with the other girls crying. You took pictures of her. You said if she told anyone, you'd do the same thing to me, and then everyone would know our whole family was sick and broken." The congregation gasped collectively. Parents pulled their children closer. I saw Mrs. Henderson from down the street covering her teenage daughter's ears. Detective Reyes was already moving from his seat in the back, his hand reaching for his phone. "These are serious accusations from a confused child," Karen said, but her voice had lost its commanding tone. She was backing toward the side exit, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. I helped that girl. I fed her, helped with homework, gave her guidance when her own mother was too busy working to parent properly. "You made her take her clothes off," Tommy said, and the church erupted in shocked murmurs. "She told me you said it was for purification, that you needed to document how the sickness was spreading through her body. You made her stand against the wall while you took pictures. You said it was medical, that you were helping her. But Sissy knew it wasn't help." My mother stood up, her face cycling between disbelief and rage. "This is absolutely ridiculous. Karen would never. She's a good Christian woman. She volunteers at the youth center. She raised 2 successful boys. Judith, stop." My father's voice cut through the chaos. Silent Gerald, who never spoke up about anything, suddenly commanded the room. "Look at Karen's face. Really look at her. That's not the face of an innocent woman being falsely accused. That's guilt." He was right. Karen's carefully applied makeup was running with sweat. Her hands were trembling, and she kept looking at the exits like she was calculating distances. "You're all insane," Karen shouted. "Listening to a 6-year-old's fantasy. He probably watched something on TV, got confused. Children can't distinguish reality from fiction when they're grieving." Tommy reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. "This opens the locked drawer in your basement desk. The one where you keep the camera and the computer with the password Purity 2019. Sissy saw you type it. She wrote it down. She wrote everything down." Detective Reyes was at the front now, his badge visible. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay right where you are." "This is harassment," Karen screamed, "based on the words of a traumatized child. Rachel, tell them this is crazy. Tell them I helped Meredith." But I couldn't speak. I was remembering every Tuesday and Thursday pickup. How Meredith would be sitting in Karen's living room, fully dressed in her coat despite the warm house, ready to leave the instant I arrived. How she'd rush to the car without saying goodbye. How she'd shower the moment we got home, sometimes twice, until her skin was red and raw. "Sissy recorded it," Tommy announced, his voice steady and clear, "on her phone." She hid the phone in the basement vent. She told me where it was in case something happened to her. The church erupted into complete chaos. My mother stood up, shouting over the noise, "This is absurd. Karen would never harm a child. She's been teaching Sunday school for 15 years. But my father, Silent Gerald, who never spoke up about anything, suddenly grabbed my mother's arm with a firmness I'd never seen before. "Judith, stop. Look at Karen's face. Just look at her and tell me that's the face of an innocent woman." Karen was backing toward the exit now, her designer heels catching on the carpet runner. Her perfectly styled hair was coming undone, and the congregation watched in stunned silence as the family's golden daughter transformed into something unrecognizable. Detective Reyes moved to block her path, his hand resting on his service weapon. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stay right where you are while we verify these claims." "Verify?" Karen laughed, high and hysterical. "You're going to verify the fantasies of a 6-year-old who just lost his sister? This is insanity." Tommy wasn't finished. He walked to the center aisle, standing small but fierce in front of 300 people. Sissy recorded it on her phone. She hid the phone in the basement vent behind the old Christmas decorations. She told me exactly where it was. She said if anything happened to her, I should get the phone and give it to the police, but only somewhere safe where Aunt Karen couldn't stop me. I collapsed back into the pew, my mind racing through memories that suddenly took on new, horrifying meanings. The weight loss I'd attributed to teenage vanity, the darkness in Meredith's eyes after every visit to Karen's house, the way she'd flinch when Karen hugged her at family gatherings, the Tuesday she'd called me at work, begging to come home sick, but Karen had convinced me she was just trying to avoid a math test. "She tried to tell you, Mommy?" Tommy said, climbing into my lap, his small body shaking. But Aunt Karen said no one would believe her because Aunt Karen was the good one and Sissy was just the broken girl from the broken mom. Aunt Karen said if Sissy told, everyone would think she was crazy like great-grandma, and they'd lock her up in a hospital. Detective Reyes had his phone out now, calling for backup. 2 off-duty police officers who'd come to pay their respects stood up from their pews, moving to position themselves near the exits. The funeral had transformed into a crime scene. Karen made a desperate lunge for the door, but Officer Martinez, who'd coached Meredith's elementary school basketball team, caught her arm. "Mrs. Palmer, you need to calm down." "Don't touch me," Karen screamed. "I'll sue all of you." "This is slander, defamation. That little brat is lying." "Then you won't mind if we search your basement," Detective Reyes said calmly. "If there's nothing there, we can clear this all up quickly." Karen's face went white. "You need a warrant. You can't just search my home based on a child's story." "Actually," Reyes said, pulling out his phone, "given the nature of the allegations and the claim that evidence exists, I can get an emergency warrant within the hour. Judge Morrison is already on the line." That's when Karen broke completely. She fell to her knees, not in prayer but in defeat, and the words that came out of her mouth chilled everyone in that church. "It's lies, all lies. That girl was disturbed. She wanted it. She was already dirty when she came to me. I was trying to cleanse her, to save her from the sickness in your bloodline, Rachel." The admission hung in the air like poison. My mother sank into her seat, her face ashen, her hands clutching her chest. "Karen? What are you saying? What did you do to my granddaughter?" "I did what you were all too weak to do," Karen screamed, mascara running down her face in black rivers. "I tried to purify her, to document the sickness before it spread. Those Tuesday and Thursday sessions were meant to help her." "Help her?" I stood up, rage giving me strength. "You tortured my daughter. You made her believe she was dirty and broken. You killed her." "No," Karen shrieked. "She killed herself because she was weak, because the sickness in your family won. I have documentation, photos that prove she was already corrupted, videos showing her compliance. She never said no. She never fought back." Detective Reyes nodded to the officers. "That's enough for an arrest. Karen Palmer, you're under arrest for child sexual abuse, production of child pornography, and false imprisonment. You have the right to remain silent." As they handcuffed her, Karen looked directly at me with eyes I'd never seen before, empty of the sister I thought I knew. She was going to infect others. I had to document it. I had to stop it. The basement was sanctified. It was holy work. Tommy pressed his face into my shoulder, and I held him as tightly as I could while we watched them take Karen away, her screams about purification and salvation echoing off the church walls until the doors finally closed behind her. The police found Meredith's phone exactly where Tommy said it would be, wrapped in a plastic bag and tucked behind a box of 1990s Christmas ornaments in the basement vent. The videos were clear and damning. 43 recordings spanning 6 months, each one showing Karen's systematic abuse, her threats, her twisted justifications that she was purifying Meredith from our family's bad blood. The detective who reviewed them told me later he'd never seen such detailed documentation from a victim. Meredith had been building a case against her aunt, gathering evidence with the precision of someone who knew they might not survive to testify. Karen was arrested at the church and charged with 15 counts of child sexual abuse, production of child pornography, false imprisonment, and contributing to the death of a minor. During the investigation, they found external hard drives with thousands of images, not just of Meredith, but of other children dating back 12 years. Her own sons, those Ivy League golden boys my mother always praised, came forward with their own stories of abuse they'd never been able to tell. My mother hasn't spoken to me since that day. She can't accept what her good daughter did to her granddaughter. She lives alone now in the house she shared with my father for 40 years, surrounded by family photos she can't bear to look at but won't take down. My father finally left her after 4 decades of marriage. He comes by every Sunday now, helping me and Tommy heal. I should have spoken up years ago, he tells me. I saw things, suspected things, but Judith wouldn't hear it. Karen was her pride and joy. We buried Meredith that afternoon with just me, Tommy, my father, and a few true friends. No more talk of broken bloodlines or mental illness running in families. No more whispers about genetic curses or inherited demons. Just grief for a beautiful girl who tried to survive something unsurvivable, who documented her truth even when she couldn't speak it aloud. Tommy and I go to therapy together now, twice a week with Dr. Chen, who specializes in trauma recovery for children. Tommy tells me Meredith visits him in dreams. Not scary visits, but peaceful ones. She says she's not in pain anymore, Mommy. She says the basement can't hurt her where she is. She says she's proud of me for being brave when she couldn't be. I've learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they're the family members who volunteer to help, who everyone trusts, who attend church every Sunday and bake cookies for school fundraisers. Sometimes they're the ones who point fingers at genetics and mental illness to hide their own evil, who use words like broken and damaged to describe their victims so no one will believe them if they ever find the courage to speak. Meredith wasn't broken. She was broken by someone we trusted, someone who used our family's trust as a weapon and my work schedule as an opportunity, someone who convinced a 14-year-old girl that she was genetically doomed, fundamentally flawed, and better off dead than living with the shame of what was happening in that basement. The house where Karen lived was searched thoroughly. They found a hidden room behind the basement wall, soundproofed and equipped with recording equipment. They found journals where Karen had written about her mission to document and purify the contaminated bloodlines in our community. There were photographs of other children, cousins, neighborhood kids who'd moved away suddenly or run away over the years. The FBI got involved when they realized the scope went beyond our state. Last week, Tommy asked me, "Mommy, why didn't Sissy tell you directly?" I held him close and told him the truth. Because Aunt Karen convinced her that no one would believe the broken girl over the good aunt. Because sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones everyone else trusts most. Because shame is a prison that feels impossible to escape, even when you're innocent. "But she told me," Tommy said quietly. "Yes, baby, she did. She protected you by trusting you with her truth. She knew you were brave enough to speak it when she couldn't anymore." Karen's trial starts next month. I'll be there every day holding Meredith's picture, making sure the world knows my daughter wasn't broken, wasn't sick, wasn't genetically doomed. She was murdered slowly, privately, by someone who smiled at family dinners and volunteered for church committees and convinced everyone she was saving my daughter while she was destroying her. The basement has been sealed by court order, but the truth is, finally in the light, where Meredith always deserved to be. Her story isn't about suicide or mental illness or broken bloodlines. It's about a brave girl who documented her truth, even when speaking it might cost her everything, and a little brother who loved his sister enough to break the silence that killed her. If this story moved you, please like this video and share it. Your comments mean everything, and subscribing to our channel helps us continue sharing these important stories that need to be heard. Remember, sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important truths.